Welcome everybody, very pleased to see you here today. I just wanted to start briefly sort of adding to what Chris said on my introduction, then go into a little bit about the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis, look a little bit then at my journey and move it then into what Hazlemere has been doing in its work on the climate crisis. So I am, as Chris said, I'm a parish councillor in Hazlemere. Now that's Hazlemere with a Z in Buckinghamshire, not our cousin with an S in Surrey. I'm also a unitary councillor in Buckinghamshire, and I got elected on the single policy of Climate Action Now. I'm also on the Local Government Association's Committee for Environment, Economy, Housing and Transport, and then I was on the equivalent grouping for NOWC previously, but now that's moved into more of a conversation group with a wider group of people now, and I'm still involved with that as well. Just to sort of set the scene, I'd like to show you a very short 3-minute video. So Chris, if you wouldn't mind bringing up that video now, that would be great.
I wish I knew before. I wish I knew much earlier.
I wish
if I had known.
When I came into it, I was just like, yeah, we're going to change all this. We're going to stop offshore drilling. We're going to make sure that this environmental agency stops allowing chemical facilities to pollute in lower income Black and Latino neighborhoods. And then realizing like, oh, people have been actually working on that for decades. I'm just new to the game.
Had been longing for seeing scientists get their hands dirty, get into the crux of the matter, get into the eye of the storm.
We are not yet able as a scientific community to help grab our fellow earthlings by the scruff of the neck and say, come, we are heading into big changes.
I wonder a lot about whether being a scientist is the best thing to do in the times of these urgent environmental crises.
It's only immediate, rapid and far-reaching action that's going to keep 1.5 degrees within reach.
For how much longer can you shout louder in more dramatic font? We need to rethink the fundamental assumptions of what we're doing.
These times are going to call on us to be the best people that we can be.
We have to translate our outrage, our fears, our anxieties, our grief about what's happening into action.
I myself have realized how hard it is, even for one person that gets into government and wants to pursue a transformative agenda, to do so alone.
It's really, really important, I think, that we support each other to take political action.
If you want to take climate action, you can. You don't have to be perfect. The world isn't on my shoulders. It's not on your shoulders. It's all of us together.
We understand enough. We understand plenty. All of our problems are fundamentally political. They're fundamentally about people. They're about our institutions. They're about our governance.
It's time to stand together to face down corruption and vested interests.
We need to let go of things we've gotten so accustomed to, so familiar, so dependent on for a long time, including not just habits and behaviors, but ways of thinking.
Visionary leadership doesn't come out of the sky. It needs to be team play at its best.
Changing the time horizons upon which we make decisions is really a big and important part of this. Yes, scientists are critical to this equation, but so is everybody else.
It's like a two-way process. I have to listen to lots of people because there are lots of things I don't know.
I used to think that things would just happen maybe by magic, but you make the change happen by walking the talk.
For many years, I felt that I was just saying, the world doesn't have to be this way. We can change it. Only in the last 5 years, I've felt that we can say we are changing it.
Together we can and must succeed.
You are the people who make the difference.
You see within the film that the film is talking about the fact that the scientists can't shout louder in any bolder font. And now it's required that the rest of us, so the leaders, step up and actually take the action that's required. And it's very interesting when we look at the journey that both science and our climate awareness have been on, is in roughly the period that EDGE has been existing. So 30 years ago, in fact, just before 30 years ago, in 1988, was the first presentation of Dr. James Hansen to the White House about carbon emissions and how we had to rapidly stop using coal and row back our carbon emissions. And then 1989 was Margaret Thatcher's famous speech to the United Nations, talking about the environmental problem and how we had to take action. Well, more than 30 years later on, we're still at it. We're still not taking enough action, and we still aren't really getting to the point of the right targets. Now, if we were in a room all together, I would now be putting a question to you. So I'm going to put the question to you, but more just for your own digestion. And that's, I'd be asking people if they think that net zero 2050 is going to save us. I'd be saying to people, do you really think that net zero 2050 in the UK is going to work as a target for us? And I'd ask people to put up their hands. And to be honest, you never get a majority of people putting up their hands. So the majority of the public have now accepted that our own target for net zero is not adequate. So from a scientific point of view, or from an angst point of view, worrying about climate, people are they've already come forward from that target. And after all, that target was really set in the Paris Accord 7 years ago through a compromise position of nearly 200 countries trying to come together to reach an agreement. And even when they reached that compromise agreement, that was actually based on effectively the science of the day, so slightly old science in order to get there. And it also assumed that everybody would take action. Now, within that, it also assumed that those who are most financially able, most sophisticated, most aware, in other words, the Western countries, would take more action. Not that countries like Britain or America would target 2050 as if that's the right target, because it clearly isn't, if we're to allow time for other countries that are less developed and less sophisticated to get to the right place as well. We would have had to go earlier. The only target now that is really going to be keeping us safe is 2030 or earlier. Now, that is based on the science. So if you look at the IPCC's last assessment report, and the IPCC, so the body that is working on climate change under the UN's auspices, and that body in its last assessment report brought out for COP26 said that our carbon budget, so the amount of carbon we can pump up into the atmosphere in order to have a chance of staying under, not even 100%, but have a chance of staying under 1.5 degrees, that carbon budget at our current rate of emissions will run out in 2028. So there will be no more carbon budget in 2028 if we want to stay under 1.5 degrees. And that is based on the UN's assessment, which is always conservative. And before any of these things come out, they're always agreed by all the governments who are able to comment on any documents that are brought out. I mean, I was at COP26, and when I was at COP26, it was delayed. It was extended by a day. So on an extra Saturday, I was there in the massive auditorium watching on the screens what was happening, and being in the cheap seats, of course, because we weren't part of government, we're in the massive auditorium next to the auditorium where all of the actual speeches are taking place. And we're watching live what's happening. Well, the Glasgow Climate Pact that had been organised and had been debated throughout the 2 weeks, the wording that had come out that they were finalising on that day or coming up with final amendments had a paragraph in it. And that paragraph in it said that if all of the countries that have put in their nationally determined contributions, this means their voluntary commitments to reducing carbon, if they follow through on all of their commitments, we will see a rise in greenhouse gas emissions of 14% by 2030. So that's in the document. In the document they're about to sign, it says, if we do everything we promised to do, we will still raise greenhouse gas emissions by 14%. And the next line says, and the IPCC says we must reduce them by 45% in the same period. So that was in there on the last day. And the bit they took out is they took out the recognition that everything we're doing is going to raise greenhouse gases by 14%. So when the document came out, it still recognized we had to drop them, but it didn't say that the current trajectory we've got is actually to increase them. So the media lost out on the opportunity to then comment on it. and nobody was coming into it with the acceptance of what we're actually doing on the planet. We've now seen July 19th, the hottest day ever in the UK, 40 degrees. The London Fire Brigade chief saying that's the worst day for instances in London since World War II. That's the worst day since World War II, and we haven't got to where we're going to on climate change yet. It's continuing to unravel. Pakistan, you'll all have seen the news reports that 30% or a third of Pakistan was underwater. Well, actually, it wasn't a third. Interestingly for us, considering we're in councils, it was 12 to 15% of the land was underwater, which is vast, but it was 1/3 of the administrative districts. So effectively, 1/3 of the councils were affected and couldn't function because they were dealing with floods and flood victims. In addition, only 6 or 8 months ago, we saw record heating in the Arctic and the Antarctic, and both of those areas are heating 3 to 4 times faster than the rest of the planet. Now, what does this mean? Well, between 1.5 and 2 degrees, the scientists believe we will lose the global tipping points. And these global tipping points are the Arctic ice sheets, the ice sheets generally, not just the Arctic, will melt uncontrollably and can't be stopped. The permafrost will melt and can't be stopped. The Amazon will become emitting, as well as a number of other tipping points. But these are the 3 sort of big ones, let's say. And when these go out of control, then climate change unravels very quickly. And it means that we are unable to bring it back, even if we turn the lights off tomorrow, shut all the factory doors and stop emitting. But where we are at the moment, we are, and the latest scientists' warning paper said, we've got 0.5 of a degree of warming in the atmosphere and in the oceans already. So we've already emitted that much carbon that's been absorbed and will gradually emit and warm the atmosphere by another 0.5 degree. So we're at 1.2 now. We are going up another 0.5 degree again if we stop tomorrow. So it is absolutely urgent. There is nothing in 2050 that will keep us safe, and we have to do all we can to bring it forward. Now, COP26 for me was the most depressing experience I've probably ever had, and I'm a super positive person, and I probably spent the following week after COP26 in something like a sort of clinical depression, and I only came out of it by coming to action and starting to work on things. But why was that? Well, the first reason is I realized at COP26 that we will never get international agreement that will keep us safe. It is not going to happen. 26 attempts at doing it. If we really think the 27th is going to do it, then clearly that's the first sign of madness. Now, was there a ray of light at COP? Well, yes, there was, but it wasn't from the COP itself. And it was actually in the council meeting for Glasgow City Council. So we were all invited, lots of councillors from different levels, and the LGA and things went to this meeting, and we heard the leader of Glasgow City Council talk about their 2030 target for the whole community in Glasgow and how they were going to go for it and going to put it right. And they were ambitious. They picked the necessary target scientifically, ambitious in what they wanted to do, and they were really, really going to try and do it. And the lady who was giving the speech was very inspiring, and it gave me hope. And it gave me hope that actually we don't have to wait for our national governments to do things, although they're extremely important. We can start doing it at local government level, and that's both parish and town councils, as well as the other levels of local government. For myself, it's been quite a journey to come here. So I'll just give you a bit of a flavour of that, and then talk more about Hazlemere Parish Council. So I'm really late to the party. I'm a little bit like the scientist who was at the beginning of the film, who's sort of saying, I thought I was doing something new and I got there and found people had been working on this for decades. Well, that's pretty much what it was. So in 2019, in the first half of it, I was a bit of doing my recycling, doing my bit, becoming more uneasy, had that feeling of unease about the climate, like there was something a lot going on that was a lot worse than I thought. And I suppose I was, reading and listening to the Pope and David Attenborough and Greta Thunberg, who all were quite vociferous and with different aspects of it. And then on the 3rd of June 2019, I started No Disposable Cup Day. Now, it doesn't seem like very much, but in terms of no disposable cups, we use about 7 million of them a day in the UK. They are made generally of plastic and paper, so are extremely difficult to recycle, and they can only be recycled in very specialist plants. but we never get them there anyway. We don't even collect them. And in fact, what happens is we drop 500,000 of them on the floor every day in the UK. We drop them on the floor, they go into the oceans, into the countryside, into the rivers, or our councils have to pay to pick them up, or we have to get our residents out doing litter picking because we drop them on the floor. And the waste pile that's produced from disposable cups every day would be the size of the Albert Hall. I mean, it's vast, and that's just Britain. And so I started No Disposable Cup Day, which is on the 4th of October every year, to try and persuade people to, for one day of the year, give up the disposable cup, get onto a reusable cup, or just have a shot of a espresso when they go in the coffee shop, and to try and change habits, which is what we're all about at parish councils. Now, the one extra effect that we had in the first year that we did it, in 2019, we'd just like to illustrate now. So I just wonder, Chris, if you might be able to show that, the TikTok that I had buoyed up for this one about disposable cups.
Yeah, thank you. What's this? Oh.
No disposable cups.
So that was just a very short. Now, I'm a TikToker, and in actual fact, that video, although we did bring it out, Boris Johnson coming out of the Conservative Party conference in about October the 2nd, 2019, had the disposable cup pulled out of his hand. And it's without question because his PR manager knew that No Disposable Cup Day was coming. But that video we put out, or I put out again on TikTok. I'm a TikToker. Yes, I know I don't look like the right age for TikTok, but I do TikTok. And that particular video I put out, and on the front of it just put fastest Conservative U-turn in history. And on the basis of what was happening at the time, and still is happening actually, it had to be pretty quick to be the fastest one. And it's now up at, I think, about 90,000 views on TikTok over the last week or two. And it's still going. So it's still gathering up views and it's spreading awareness. After No Disposable Cup Day got started, I then started to absorb a lot more information on the environment, and particularly it was the scientists' warnings. And when I read the scientists' warnings at that time, the 1992 and the 2017 warnings, the thing that struck me was the number of scientists that had signed it. So the first one was signed by 1,700 scientists, as it showed in the film, and more than half of the Nobel Prize winners in science that were alive at the time. The second one had already been signed by 15,000 scientists when I read it, making it the most endorsed scientific paper ever, and no one seemed to know about it. It really sort of shook me up. I started absorbing a lot of information, and then sometime in the third week of June 2019, I had a dream. And I'm a single father, so I've got 2 kids. I'm sure that many people can relate to how difficult it is bringing up kids, particularly if you're a single mum or dad. And my kids were, at the time, they're about 10 and 12. In my dream, they're 30. They're arriving back to my semi-detached in Hazlemere, knocking on the door, coming in, and they're all in their army kit. So complete khakis, berets on, army bags, and they're coming into the hall, then they dump their army bags down, they come into the living room, and they come and say to me, I'm having a coffee, and they go, Papa, we just come back from Europe where we're shooting people to stop them getting the drinking water. They look at me and say that they could be killed, but they've got great flak jackets, that they are well equipped, and they've got big guns, but they are shooting the poor people who have smaller guns to stop them getting the drinking water in order for us to continue living in the luxury lifestyle that we're living in the UK. And that's what they tell me. And then they pause and they say, and Papa, you knew about this 20 years ago. What did you do about it? And at that moment, I'm waking up. And as I sort of sit up in bed, and I've got a slight tear coming down my cheek, and I'm mouthing the words, but I have to look after you. But I've got a mortgage. But I've got a job. And then I sat up in bed and I just went, forget it. None of that is important if the world unravels before my eyes. And I've worked pretty much on climate change every single day since then. And within that, the first thing actually that I did was I stood in the general election, which occurred a month or two after that, because one of my sons told me to sort of step up or shut up, actually, when I was driving him to school. I stood in the general election just to draw attention to climate issues. And then the next thing was joining the parish council. So in very early 2020, I went to the parish council I investigated with the clerk if there was a position. There was. So I went to a meeting and said I'd like to be co-opted. I was co-opted either at that meeting or at the beginning of the next one. And then the immediately first thing I did is I proposed that we should declare a climate emergency and set a 2030 net zero target for our community. So we went ahead and did that almost immediately. It was stunning how many of the people on the parish council were already in support of that kind of action. And then we set up a climate emergency working party, of which I'm the chairman and I still am. So that was a very momentous part of my journey. I moved on then start organising and being managing director of Scientists Warning Europe. I then stood in the Unitary Council elections only on a policy of climate action. And in fact, Chris introduced me as an independent on Hazlemere Parish Council. Well, I'm totally delighted to say that that actually isn't relevant in Hazlemere because we're completely apolitical. We have a super cooperative group of people on the Parish Council. It's really a dream and a pleasure to turn up to council meetings and to interact. I'm not saying we agree with each other on everything. That's not the point. But it's really, really wonderful. We have a fantastic clerk as well, who when I've been to training sessions and that has had compliments from other clerks. So delighted with the whole setup of our Parish Council. We get a lot of things wrong, but we try very hard to do the right thing, as I'm sure in all of your councils is the same. The politics only starts at Buckinghamshire Unitary Council. And when I stood in a completely conservative ward with a single policy of climate action now, and I pushed two of the Conservatives into third and fourth, and I came second and won my seat. And it's nothing about being anti-conservative, it's just that the opposition in Hazlemere is all Conservative. I mean, it's never had anybody but Conservative councillors previously. I then actually, and just as a merciless plug, I wrote a little book. So it's on how to become a councillor. So, and I wrote that after I got in, because particularly when you're an independent candidate, you have to work very hard to get elected as a councillor. And then I wanted to write down all of my thoughts and advice so that others could do it, particularly independents and those in smaller groups and organisations, although as well it's relevant for Conservatives, Liberal Democrats and Labour. Most recently, in terms of climate action, we formed the Climate Party. So, and that's a group of councillors from around the country with a number of supporters, scientists, economists, and various others, businessmen. We formed the Climate Party. We formally launched on the 5th of September when the leadership was changed for when we got our Prime Minister announced, purposely because we wanted to state that we were trying to force climate leadership when climate leadership isn't happening. And in very brief terms, we're a centre-right, pro-business, pro-climate party. We're aiming to take on the Conservatives in their 100 marginal seats at the next election, plus also those who are members of the climate denial group of the Conservatives, the net zero scrutiny group in all of their constituencies. So it's about 110 constituencies. And we are fixed on a 2030 target as the only scientific target that can keep us safe, but also it's a business target. The obviously trajectory of our country and of our world is towards decarbonisation, towards solving the biodiversity and the climate crisis, and all of that is going to create vast amounts of opportunity for business, for finance, and for social innovation, and Britain can lead that. And if we stay where we are now, we won't be leading it. We'll be buying our solar panels from China, whereas we can actually get to the point, get to the front of it, do all the innovation that's needed and lead the world. And Hazlemere, in our parish council, to some extent, that's what we've been trying to do. I already understand that there may well be representatives here of parish councils who are much more successful and advanced than us. Within our county, we're one of only 3 or 4 parish and town councils that do have a 2030 target and are really going for it. I mean, I can't name every single one of them, but Hazlemere and Buckingham are 2 of the others that come to mind. But we set a 2030 target in order to get ourselves aimed at something. If you don't set a target, you don't aim at the right thing. This is an emergency. We are running out of time. You must set yourselves, if you can, ambitious targets and try and get there. If you can't get there, that's one thing, but at least you're trying and you're in the right direction. If you don't set a target, or you set a target at 2040 or 2050, you're clearly not going to make it in the right time. Once we set the target, the other crucial thing was forming the working party. Some councils form a committee, some get it being something that's just a residents' association working, but we formed a working party, which is effectively about half councillors and half local people. We then are working now, and we're still working on it, I'm afraid to say, so we haven't done everything very, very quickly, on a really good plan for decarbonisation of the whole community, starting with decarbonising the parish council. Some of you will already have achieved this, and then moving on to trying to get the whole community there in 2030, which is a big ask, particularly if you're in a county that doesn't have that target. First thing we did was obviously to move to green energy supplier. So the council now has a green energy supplier, get smart meters put in so that you can monitor it, and all those who have smart meters or have them at home will understand how it makes you understand how you're spending your energy, particularly now when energy's become so expensive. It's a really good way of monitoring what you're doing. We're looking at solar and batteries, and this is not just for our parish council buildings that we use, but for some other buildings that we influence or are involved with around in the parish. And the idea is to have all of these done together, reduce the costs, etc. And then we want to get EV charging points put in. In fact, after this, I go off to a meeting with Chargey, so one of the big EV charging points suppliers who had I think they received, I think, 400 million from the government to roll out EV charging points. They've done quite a lot in London already. So some of you, won't be parishes in London, but anybody who's in and out of London may have been able to use them. But they're now rolling out into a number of the other counties around London. But there are other suppliers in other parts of the country. Now, the point of what they're doing for us, and I'm not advocating them, we haven't agreed to work with them or anything yet, but their business model is that they will come and they'll put in all the EV charging points absolutely free of charge. And they then will run those EV charging points for you. They'll repair them all if anything goes wrong. And there is a small amount of money that goes to the parish or town council from that contract as well. So on the face of it, it looks good. We have a third meeting with them today when they're going around to talk about where they can put them. And most of these go straight into lampposts and things like that. We have a number of areas where we have streets with no road going to the actual buildings. They're just paved, and then an area of garages, which are perfect for it. But our aim is not just to get in 2 or 3 EV charging points, but maybe 30 or 40 or 50, so that they're really everywhere in the parish. And if we did that, we'd already be at about 50% of the level of the whole county in terms of what Buckinghamshire County is doing. We've moved on as well. We've got some advanced recycling areas. So we looked at what was happening in our recycling locally, and then a number of local residents who are in the working party organised advanced recycling at our community centre, where various items that can't be recycled easily through our curbside recycling can be recycled there. The one that always sticks in my mind, because I find it slightly funny, is marigold gloves. So we have marigold gloves recycling there, but we've also done coffee pods and various other things. We've been encouraging people on the soft plastics. So previously we had collected them and taken them off somewhere. Now, luckily, the 2 co-ops in our area are doing soft plastics recycling. We don't have a major supermarket in our area. And so we are pushing and encouraging lots of people to go in and use that. And to be honest, the local co-op started with 1 or 2 small bins to put it in. They've now expanded to 4. They're having to change it all the day and keep emptying it because people really are getting behind the recycling. And maybe just in terms of mentality, I could briefly mention to you that when I went door to door for the unitary council elections, but meeting all of our local residents, and I probably talked to about 1,000 local residents, and we're a place of about 3,000, 3,500 houses. A lot of people were scared about the climate crisis, particularly the older age groups, and they were proud of the fact that Hazlemere was doing something and thankful that something was happening. And they ended up sort of thanking me quite a lot for what the parish council was doing. And that's even when we don't feel we're being very effective and getting very far, but it is being noticed by people, and it's giving them a feeling of comfort and a feeling of agency. We then set up a repair cafe. So a place where you can bring in your electrical items, clothes, bicycles, tools for sharpening, etc., so that we can help extend the usage of clothes and tools and everything else. And we've coordinated it with other towns. So Wickham and Marlow, which are local to us, we're on a different Saturday to each of them. So now in the local area, there are 3 repair cafes happening on alternate weekends. We hope to get a 4th join us soon. We've done a food waste awareness. We've run things with another local organisation, and we're trying to get people to think about that. We set up a youth group. It worked quite well for a while. Unfortunately, as youth priorities change as they go through exams and other things, it's difficult to hold the group together. If anybody has any advice and has a successful model working locally, that would be great to hear about. We've then done Hazlemere climate talks. So we've done about 25 Hazlemere climate talks on different topics related to the environment. Some of these are ones which are very localized, so nappy library, so something we could really be doing locally, tree protection. Otherwise, are more about solar in general, grid technology related to energy, and we tend to do one topic that could be very local, composting, and then a topic that could be national as well, and we keep doing these, and they're open to everybody. Two of the more important things then that we came into are tree protection. So we are constantly now trying to protect our trees. We brought in a neighbourhood plan. I'm happy to talk about that a bit more later on, and it's in consultation at the moment, and we will hopefully get that through. But within that, as an example, we are asking for 25% canopy cover on every development in the parish within 10 years. So already there is a plan, a wider plan for the district, what was the district in Wickham, which is suggesting canopy cover of 25% within 25 years. Well, clearly, although nice, it's almost completely useless because there's nothing to protect those trees in between, and no one's there to monitor it in 25 years, as well as the fact we don't have time. So we're bringing it forward, and I think it's now in there as 10 years. We had debated trying to get it in there as 5 years, in order to prevent trees being cut down and to make developers think more about the mature trees that are on their site, that they should be retaining them and working around them, or potentially moving them, because if not, they're going to have to guarantee canopy cover in a pretty short period of time in the future. On TPOs, we've done instruction courses to help local people apply for TPOs, that's tree preservation orders. We're also going to create a form where they can come in and just do it automatically, and they can do it on a form run by the parish council, which then goes immediately off to Buckinghamshire's arboriculturalists in the hope of getting the tree protection orders. And currently, I'm actually liaising with people in planning at Bucks about how we do all of this. We've then brought out, and in a minute, Chris, just be showing actually the last slide. We've sort of gone ahead from my third one. But we then have created a project which has been wildly successful, and it's called B Squared. Now, B Squared, as in B square, and the initial thing was a bit of fun for kids to talk about, you know, your square, I'm square, B square. But also B Squared was about creating 1 square metre of wildflowers in your front garden. Pollinators have been decimated in the country, not the World Wildlife Fund, but anyway, the National Trust, I can't remember now, in the UK has said that within the UK, we have 17 bee species that are regionally extinct. Now, regionally extinct meaning they can't get from one place to another because we've got too much concrete, too much monoculture grass and monoculture agriculture in their way, and they can't travel. So we're trying to create big pollinator corridors now. And we started 2 years ago in Hazlemere. We were joined immediately by Wickham as a community group. And what we did is we took wildflower seeds, we bought them in bulk, we packed them up with volunteers, and we delivered them to every single one of our houses, 3,500 houses, with a leaflet as well. And the whole idea is that they would plant their seeds into this 1 metre square in their front garden, creating pollinator areas for our bees and our moths and our butterflies throughout the parish. The cost to the parish was minimal. I mean, it was about 28p per packet, but we didn't pay it anyway because it was immediately sponsored. In the first day, we went out and asked for sponsors. A local estate agent, a local shop, and another came in to sponsor it, and it was immediately paid for. Now, what it did is it raised awareness of the Climate Emergency Working Party and the work that Hazlemere is doing immediately, as well as being something everybody loved and everybody could get into. And there are loads of videos online of kids planting the seeds and that sort of thing. It works so well that this year we got a number of awards. You'll also see it featured on the Local Government Association website. But also this year it's now been expanded. So we have a lot of other towns and villages that have taken place. It's now been paid for and organised by several of our community boards. So these are boards which sort of are sub the county council and above the parishes and towns. And it's also even in places that have heard talks by me or others that are now around the country. And we, in addition to planting these bee squares, we have also set up volunteer groups of children, and they stand at the edge of the parish, and we've created another leaflet with a map on it, and they're able to stand there and hand out maps to every bee coming into Hazlemere so they know where the areas are. Okay, I can't actually listen for your laughs at that, which I would be able to do if we were live, but I hope that you found that fractionally funny. And then just to show you the poster, because the leaflet that went out with the seed packets contained instructions, but on the back side, it contained a little picture of a bee so that people could put it up into their windows. Chris, would you mind showing that, please?
Okay.
Thank you. And I'll just talk, I mean, it's just a little cute bee, B squared. We had somebody design it for us, and we found that in the first year, it was a little bit better than every 20th house put it up in their window. So it had a real effect. You can see the H for Hazlemere in the middle. It's been copied in other places, but they've done it without the H, obviously, because they're not all beginning with H. And it just started to create a lot of community feeling. So we'll be going into our third year this coming year. We'll be repeating it again. We've already seen notes from some of the other parishes and towns asking for a meeting so we can all coordinate it together. A really wonderful project. I'm sort of, thanks Chris, coming to a close now. So really I just would like to probably finish before we get some questions, to encourage you, if you can, to pick targets scientifically that have a chance of keeping us all safe. Look at projects that can get the local community really excited and really involved, and also look at coordination with the higher levels of councils, whether that's getting funding from them or working with them on pensions, on planning, on pollinators, on EV charging points, because a lot of this is all stuff we can do together. And I think what I would do then is to just leave you with one thought, and this is about a sort of higher level of councils. So there is overlap, actually it's both, it's for all levels of councils. We talk about getting to net zero in 2030. Now there's a third of the higher level of councils that have got a 2030 target. A majority of those have it for their whole community, and some just for the parish, for the council itself. And then underneath there are hundreds, if not thousands now, parish and town councils with 2030 targets. Now, within all of those areas, that should mean that on the 1st of January 2031, you can't build a building that emits any carbon in the build. So that would mean no steel and no concrete and other materials that emit carbon in the build, because otherwise it's not going to be net zero. So that would say about a third of the country of the higher councils plus the parish and town councils won't be allowing that kind of building on the 1st of January 2031. Now, that's a vast change, and industry is only just waking up to that here in terms of cement and steel and suppliers and developers. And that's something we should grip hold of now. Now, what that does mean, though, is that for all of us, and it doesn't matter the level of council, is local plans and neighbourhood plans will need to be brought in, because that's the only way we can all make it happen. But assuming we do it, and that is local council, local government action, we will effectively decarbonise building in the entire country. Because if a third of the country, if all of our councils have 2030 targets, hold their resolve, if a third of the country is building clean buildings in 2031, is the rest of the country going to continue building dirty ones? Of course not. It's going to move forward, and it's going to start using those supply lines and those clean materials to build its own buildings. And in Exeter at the moment, where they build all their own buildings for social housing and things, and they have found over the last 5 years that when they take the highest standard of insulation, it's called passive house, and this is what can be done with these innovations when you get the supply lines right, is they have found that the additional cost of building a perfect building fit for the future, which is passive house, hugely insulated, hugely sealed, takes very little heat to heat it, and they're able to build their houses at only 2 to 5% more than they were building them before, and their flats have become cheaper. It was more expensive to do shoddy workmanship before, to build the buildings that weren't fit for purpose, than to do it perfectly. And once the suppliers, who grumbled away for about a year or 18 months when they brought it in, once those suppliers actually start to understand that it's going to be done perfectly the first time, it all is, and actually it's cheaper for them to build flats. Anyway, I leave you with those stories. I'm very pleased to be here to answer any questions if anybody has them, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Ed. That's really much appreciated. We have questions for you, not surprising. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Julie, who's going to be relaying to you. And that's great. Thank you very much, Ed.
Great. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah. Hi, Ed. That was absolutely fascinating, and I really enjoyed that thing about the B squared. I'm going to be taking that away from my parish council, definitely.
Brilliant.
I was wondering, because climate change is such a vast thing for small councils. So what changes have been, you've outlined a few of the changes already, but what changes would you say that a parish council could start with?
Well, obviously, I mean, B squared is absolutely the simplest. I mean, in terms of one that is wide ranging, can go to everybody in the community. Everybody is interested in helping the pollinators. It's visible. I mean, obviously, if you're in a very rural area with all massive houses, you won't see the posters and the windows so much, but it's very visible. The kids like it, everybody else likes it. And it's a way to start communicating you're taking action, because the leaflet that goes out can talk about your working party, and it can talk about some of the thornier issues or the more necessary steps, for instance, like setting a target for 2030, but it can all go out in that leaflet. So I would really encourage you to do B squared. Another one that's very good for communication actually is a repair cafe. And again, if you're a widespread and you're very rural, it's slightly more difficult, but the repair cafe becomes a beacon for people to come in and talk about the issues as well. So it becomes a social spot as well as a spot that actually is pressing out the message and helping people keep their things going. They're the easy ones. You're talking about the big ones, energy. So energy and transport. So if you're if you've got parish council or town council buildings, we talk about it incessantly at the moment in the press, but you need to insulate them properly, put solar on top, and if you've got the money, you then move towards battery storage and heat pumps. It depends how much energy you're using, but the first two, the insulation and the solar panels, are absolutely the things you should be doing.
That's really great, thank you. During your presentation, you mentioned a company that will help councils with their electric vehicle charging points. Is there a name of the company? Can you mention that?
I can certainly mention it again. What I don't want to do is find myself endorsing it. As you know, none of us should be endorsing things, particularly if we're not using them yet. But we're looking at it, and I'm just saying the system they've got looks good, but we haven't worked with them yet. So, but it's Chargy, but it's char.gy, I believe, is their website. So char.gy. And they're owned by a financial organization called Zouk Capital, Z-O-U-K Capital, who I believe are the recipients of the 400 million I mentioned from the government. And they literally will put them in for free. Now, they're not the only one, and they are working in the area from London and surrounding. So there may well be several others in other parts of the country.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you for that. And I've just had a follow-up question from one of our delegates, that they've been supporting local wildlife with bee bombs. I mean, what are your thoughts about using that in combination with the B squared style flowering?
There's nothing that's exclusive. It's not like you should do one or the other. I mean, if you've got the time, money, and inclination, then do lots of other things. And the slight drawback on bee bombs, because we did look at it, is wildly more expensive than buying yourself 30 kilograms of seed, putting a teaspoon into an envelope and putting it around. And it has a slightly less level of involvement if you're throwing it out into your garden, but that's about it. I mean, there's no reason why you shouldn't do both. The other thing, actually, I didn't mention it, but we had also, we're really a town in Hazlemere, but we're surrounded by countryside. You would have called us semi-rural before, but we're almost not. But what we did as well is we took several areas and turned them into wildflower meadows. So areas of grass, for instance, that were in between a U shape of buildings, and we took up all the turf and we turned it into wildflower meadow as well. So all of these things should be done together. The B squared one, it's a system, it's quite visible, people like it, and it's cheap.
Yeah, definitely. Do you have, or can you direct us to resources for an action plan to get councils started? Is there sort of documentation that you can direct us to?
Well, the places to go, I mean, NAUC is the #1 place to go and look on that. And then there are various other charities and that are working on it. I have to say, I don't, off the top of my head, know one that's got a simple action plan. I guess Greenpeace probably has something for councils as well that I've seen. But to be honest, it's not that complicated, and I think we can get a little bit worried about the complication. Is the first steps are pretty easy, and once you've got started, the rest of the information flows. I know that sounds a little bit trite for people that are struggling to get started, but the first thing is to make the commitment to get started, and that's by setting a target. And lots of people say setting the target is rubbish. It's about the steps you take. Well, of course it is, but actually by setting the right target, you get going and you focus minds, and then the information flows in. You're also welcome to contact our parish as well for extra information. There's quite a bit on our website and our clerk. But the first thing is set the target. The next thing is pick one or two things to get started on. And the first one I would say is to get a committee or working party going. And that's in preference to having one person on the parish council in charge of it, because it's pretty lonely when you're the one person trying to do it. It's much better when you've got a group of minds. So sorry, not terribly helpful in directing you straight to something, but just suggesting the steps that might be taken.
Well, maybe that could be your next book, Ed, a dummy's guide for councils.
Right, maybe. I suppose I have to say it's something I've probably considered, but oddly enough, writing even a small book like the one I wrote takes quite a lot of time, bizarrely.
You wonder, because I work for a couple of small councils, and you wonder if there should be a national working party or a district level working party that looks at the whole area rather than lots of little councils doing it all, individually.
I agree with you, and NOUC has, so for anybody who's super interested, and I think it's open to clerks and councillors and everybody involved in local councils. They have effectively a WhatsApp group now with about 150 people on it who are posting stuff, advising each other and that sort of thing. Now that was a sort of move on from what was originally a bit of a committee structure previously, and I was one of the people on it. And it has its advantages, is that if you plug into it, you can already access information from other people, and there tend to be enthusiastic people that are on it, otherwise they wouldn't have registered. What we don't have is the great direction that's coming from it. And in fact, now you've mentioned it, maybe I will talk to NOUC again, but also if several of you, all of you, could write to NOUC and just say, what are you already doing and can we coordinate this better? Because certainly my journey over the last few years has suggested that we can crack this together. We can do it. We don't need national government. And the example I was giving on the planning rules for building, that's councils at all levels totally changing the way that construction will be done in this country. So yeah, I think you've made a point. I will talk to them. I think now it's the right place to go to, and they need probably now to get another proper group together to coordinate this.
Yeah, that would be really helpful. Thank you for that, Ed. And that really takes us to the end of the questions that I've got. And I found your presentation really interesting, and I've written down lots of notes myself to take back to my council. So thank you for that.
That's great. Just seeing we've got 1 minute. Can I do one shout out to people as well in councils? Just a very quick one is, there's about a third of our parish and town councils in the country that don't have enough councillors. So roughly speaking, on our call today, there's probably about 10 of us who don't have enough councillors in our parish or town council. And it would be wonderful if we made a real effort to bring in people, and preferably youth. If we bring the youth in, get them to get a seat under the table, and hopefully they can encourage us to take some more of this action and help us with it.
Yeah, I agree. So, thank you very much. Over to you, Chris.
Well, Ed, absolutely superb, as I knew it would be, because you inspired me back in July. So thank you. And it's interesting how things come together, because we became carbon neutral in July as a business, and we're starting to actually really embrace the idea of supplying our software as carbon neutral software. And it's a journey, we accept that. And it's interesting to see where we're going to go. And half of our team, Ed, are practitioners. So people like Julie, you just spoken to, she's a clerk. So we're working through the practical side of actually what does this really look like, and it helps to actually make sure that things that we do are more sort of focus. Now, the video from this session is going to be published in about a day's time, so everybody able to watch that at their leisure. And anyone watching this now, you'll be able to share this video then with your councillors and your colleagues so that they can also watch it at their leisure. So, Ed, thank you. Much appreciate your time, and even better, you actually managed to catch up on the couple of minutes I lost at the beginning of the session. So well done.
Brilliant. That's an absolute pleasure. And if anybody needs more help or information, please feel free to contact us at Hazlemere Parish Council.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you very much indeed.
All the best.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.